some empty seats in the back row if anybody wants to squeeze in and sit down. Thank you so much for coming. I know the weather isn't in our favor, but the conversation is really important and timely, and I'm glad that you've all made the time to be here for it. But has anyone here not been to this space before, to Word Up Community Bookshop?
I'm not from New York.
Okay. Well, welcome to Word Up. Before we start the event, I'm going to just share a little bit about the space. We're a bookstore and art space, and we started as a pop-up shop in 2011. We were supposed to just be around for 1 month, but there was so much community support for the space that we got extension after extension. People were bothering elected officials who were bugging the landlord, and we ended up staying for 15 months at that original location, which was 10 blocks up. A new landlord closed that space down, so the collective that had stayed together and pulled together during that year, which numbered 100 people at one point, all from the neighborhood, we stayed together and we did an Indiegogo campaign. We raised $70,000 online and offline, and that money went all toward building this space. So we've been here since 2013. We still do our best as we can to operate as a collective. There is some staff now, and but we're still largely volunteer operated. 60 people active at any given time, and we have events nearly every day. But the most important thing to say about this space is that Word Up was essentially created out of a crisis of access. There are so many. We're in the capital of publishing in the country, and even in this city alone, there are so many neighborhoods, millions of people, millions of kids who aren't able to access just very simple physical books because of so many reasons. But the further you work in it, it's not just because you have a space that has books in it doesn't mean people are going to come in. And even if they do come in, and even if they do start to access them, when you get into the questions of representation and the comfort levels of books on that level, it gets even more complicated, and the issue becomes it just gets worse and worse the further back you look. And so because of all that, I'm really happy that this conversation is happening here today. And I'm so glad that you had success with the campaign earlier this week, and that we'll be able to celebrate that too with cake picked up by Carolina. And most of all, I'm also just happy that this event has come together with organizers who've done things regularly in this space and continue to. This whole month, Alicia will be here, and the next few, and Angie, who's still to come, with workshops, events, and all kinds of things in store and out of the store that help us all just become more on the same page and just become more of a neighborhood and more of a community. So, with that, Alicia Anabel Santos, Afro-Latina, lesbian, writer, producer, Santera, and founder of the New York City Latina Writers Group. She's a 2018 award winner for the Brio, which is Bronx Recognized as its own for fiction. She's the author of the memoir Finding Your Force, A Journey to Love. Copies are available here. And she's currently completing her second memoir, IDGAF, I Don't Give a Fuck, a memoir of three generations of rage. You can find her on Instagram at _La Santera. And she'll introduce everybody else and what we're doing this evening. Thank you. I forgot one really important element about what is happening these days at Word Up. We have just received some support to do outreach for the census. And people will be actually able to take the census here. This is a really critical piece, even though it sounds like it would be outside the wheelhouse of a bookstore. It's all about the access. It's access to the resources. If we aren't being counted, then you aren't getting those resources. So it seems to fit, exactly with what we've been doing already. So when you come back here, you can find out more. You can ask me, Carolina, Emmanuel. We've been going to 1 billion census trainings if you have any questions about it. And also come back for any events and just fill it out here if you want. It's easy. Yes.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to Word Up Community Bookshop. Thank you so much, Vero and the team, for making this happen and providing us a space to have this really important conversation. Tonight is titled Writing Against the White Gaze. And it's the intention for this evening is to be in solidarity with the, I'm lost at losing my Dignidad Literaria movement, right? And so I'm really honored to be moderating the panel and to have this incredible group of writers, authors, educators, activists. And actually I'm gonna allow them all to introduce themselves. So we have Sofia Quintero, Sonia Alejandra Rodriguez, Roberto Lovato, and we have Angie Abreu, who is gonna be on her way. She's a little late. So just, I want this night to be, we're in a sala, it's very informal. We're having a celebration tonight because we had a huge win, and Roberto will speak more to that. And so, yeah, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. We know that it's cold and it's a Thursday and we're uptown. And so this goes to show you how much this matters to you. And as a writer, I want to appreciate that. My name is Sofia Quintero. I describe myself as an Ivy League homegirl, Bronx born, raised, still live there. I'm an author, writer, producer, educator, Afro-Latina, particularly Puerto Rican and Dominican. I think it's important to just name those things in these spaces.
Hi, everyone. I know, we're barely waking up at 7 o'clock. I'm Dr. Sonia Alejandra Rodriguez. I'm a professor of English at LaGuardia Community College, part of the CUNY system. I'm also a writer and just an all-out advocate for diverse literature in the classroom, outside of it, in the community, and in my own writing. I look forward to the conversation.
Hello, everyone, and everyone watching us in the country. Welcome to you, despite my rude panel here, fellow panelists. My name is Roberto Lovato. I'm a writer. I have a memoir coming out in September 1st, Unforgetting, a memoir of revolution and redemption. It has that title for reasons I can't go into now, except that say that my family's from El Salvador, and I went there, and I was not a spectator. And I discovered that El Salvador is a land where the poets found revolutionary organizations. So, as I said on Democracy Now! Yesterday, some of us never learned the artificial distinction between poetry and politics. And so, I see this as much as a political discussion as it is a literary discussion, because conversations of the literary too often discuss it in a vacuum, as if great genius writers just pop out of the sky, when in fact they're propped up like mediocre writers like Jeanine Cummins. So we'll have a lot to talk about. Thank you.
So my first question is, why do you write? Who do you write for? Who's your audience? Everyone.
I write for my own. I write for the young women like I was growing up in the Bronx, who did not see herself in the pages of her books, was a voracious reader, and did not see my reality reflected, or when people did attempt to depict me, they got it wrong. And so a lot of writers say this, but it's true for me that I write the stories that I want to see. And I really do believe in the power of culture, particularly popular culture, to make social change, to promote social justice. So I definitely do think of myself as a cultural worker. So, a lot of folks, I really appreciated what you said, Roberto, because people like to say that entertainment is apolitical, and it's not. Certainly not in this U.S. Context. Entertainment is absolutely political. Any media you put out is sending you a message. It's promoting something. We think of the only media that promotes something are advertising and commercial, but no, the stories, the movies, the poems, the songs, the videos, they are all selling us something. So they're either selling us a vision of the way things are, or they're selling us a vision of the way things could be, or they're trying to shape the narrative. So entertainment matters and is very political, and that's why we need movements like Dignidad Literaria to demand our place in the cultural conversation in the United States and abroad. So I'm just making my contribution. One book at a time.
Yeah, that was great. I'll echo Sophia, right, and say that as a writer, as a fiction writer, I'm only able to write for myself, right? I'm telling stories. I'm trying to tell stories that will hopefully speak to a lot of people, right? But as a Mexicana, as someone that was formerly undocumented, as someone that's bi, like I can only tell like that particular story. And of all the Mexican formerly undocumented bi girls out there, like that particular story doesn't speak to all of us, right? And so I try to write stories that undo, right, the dominant narrative, that tell young girls or young people that our culture doesn't value, that our existence doesn't value us, that we don't matter. But just again, to echo Sophia, right, it's just like one little slice of what can happen and what needs to happen. As an academic, my academic writing also has a lot to do with Latinx children's literature, and that writing in particular is aimed at also trying to find a place within academia for Latinx literature overall, because it, just like we see it in publishing, academia, as you know, is still very predominantly white. And so our stories get erased at multiple levels, from the publishing industry, what makes it to the classroom, what scholars are writing about. So I'm trying to go at it from like different angles, as many angles as I can.
Hi, Cap. I started writing because my friend Freddie Weinstein and I, in the 5th grade, started stealing the whole collection of the Danny Duncan set in the 1970s from the main library in San Francisco. We loved the words so much. And so I'm sorry to the public library system that I ripped you off so big time, but I was a kid growing up down the street from the project. So, but then, you know, I also, my first real love of any book was the Word of God. I'm not going to come off like those Pentecostals down the street. I used to be kind of one of them, but no mas. But I do believe that there's a power in words that I learned as a child that read, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You know, in some cultures, you're not a legitimate, real, existing human being until your community, like the Guarani, sings you into existence, right? So there's a power in words that we're kind of losing out on because of what philosopher Jacques Ellul calls the humiliation of the word by media technology, right? So the good thing is the word is still around, it's still powerful, and those of us that still love it and fight for it are Jedi Knights, as we're proving to Macmillan and Flatiron, right? So I write because it's an edifying act, it's an act of sanity in a world of unreason. And I write because I want to subvert. I want to disorganize the senses of people that are being bombarded by fascistic organization of their senses right now. To, you know, in a riff on Hambo, or however the hell you want to say it. So I'll leave it at that.
So I wanted to share a quote by a brilliant writer. She said, "I never asked Tolstoy to write for me, a little colored girl in Lorain, Ohio. I never asked James Joyce, not to mention Catholicism or the world of Dublin. Never. It is that business of being universal, a word hopelessly stripped of meaning for me. Faulkner wrote what I suppose could be called regional literature and had it published all over the world. That's what I wish to do. If I tried to write a universal novel, it would be water. Behind this question is the question that To write for black people is somehow to diminish the writing. From my perspective, there are only black people. When I say people, that's what I mean. This writer also said, I have had reviews in the past that have accused me of not writing about white people. I remember a review of Sula in which the reviewer said, this is all well and good, but one day she, meaning me, will have to face up to the real responsibility and get mature and write about the real confrontation for black people, which is white people, as though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. And I have spent my entire writing life trying to make sure that the white gaze was not the dominant one in any of my books. From the late Toni Morrison. Right? Writing against the white gaze. You hear that, and what does that mean for you? Welcome, Angie Abreu, founder of the Dominican Writers Association. Before we answer questions, do you want to introduce yourself or take a breath? What do you want to do?
Oh my God, I have so much going on today, but I made it.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Angie Abreu, and I am the founder of the Dominican Writers Association. And our platform is dedicated to amplifying the voices of mostly Dominican writers, but more so writers of colors, right? We help them get published. We connect them to editors, to people in the publishing industry, and we have now an annual writers conference where we have one entire day where our writers take writing workshops and panel discussions with industry folks. So it's going to be very interesting this year. But so far, none of the literary agents that we've booked have canceled on us. And one of them is from Flatiron. And she's still at it. I emailed her yesterday, and I was like, I hope you're still making it. I feel it's even more important for you to show face. So she was like, definitely, I agree with you. She's a white literary agent, and she said, I'm totally with you, and I'll be there.
Awesome.
So
Yay.
I was happy with that.
That's awesome. Writing against the white gaze. What does that mean to you? What is that? Anyone? Oh, go ahead.
Waiting for everybody. I was telling the group, we have a group chat for today's town hall, and I was saying that I grew up reading white authors, but it never crossed my mind to write for them, right? Even in writing workshops, when you have writing professors, you know, my writing professor was a person of color, so she shared black authors. And even though it's not the same as, you know, sharing Latino stories, it was authors that I could still relate to. So I never had that in me that, oh, maybe my story doesn't matter, or I should tone, you know, or reword how I write so that the white people could understand it. Like, that never crossed my mind. And I learned about the white gaze later on through Toni Morrison and whatnot. And then when I was taking those classes, that's when I said, there's got to be Latino writers. Let me look them up. And those were the ones that inspired me. And because I saw those stories being written, I said I could write my own. So it's something that I've always pushed out there and encourage people to do, to just write your story. There's always an audience for your story, and one day white people will catch on to that. Because we're dead tired of hearing them saying that your book isn't marketable because, you know, I don't get it, or there isn't an audience for it, which is one of the things that they said to Angie Cruz before she published Dominicana, right? And she had to shop that book for 2 to 3 years for someone to finally say, we could do something with it. Roberto, what does that mean to you?
I wasn't going to say anything. I actually don't. I mean, I've caught myself writing for the white gaze. I think any of us that writes has to recognize we live in an unconditionally saturated, a system that's saturated with white supremacy from, from the heavens to your bone marrow. And if we don't realize that, then we're kidding ourselves. And our subconsciouses are chock full of that crap. So that said, though, I feel like we're at a stage now where there's an opening, not just because of this week or anything, but because things are happening in the world. Like Donald Trump reflects that world. And we can write. I'd rather write about my gaze, my inner gaze, the gaze of my loved ones. And there's an opportunity to do that. Writing against is important, but writing for, I think, is more important. I think it's at that moment right now, speaking as a person with poetic inclinations and as a person with political desire, I think we have to do as Carl Jung and Anais Nin encouraged us to do, which was to proceed from the dream outward. And I, as a writer, now going through this big publishing system, can tell you that all these different, it's like a obstacle course to get your book published, for getting the deal, to getting an agent, to getting a good editor, and I have all the above. But what it takes to get there is an obstacle course that will often lead you to just say, to go to your default of white supremacy, which is, lo mío vale verga. Lo mío no sirve. It's no good. I'm not any good. The system's not accepting me. That's your default system that's set up for you as a writer, even as an editor. So to overcome that, you need to have the adamantine power of your vision and your dream. It applies to poetry. It applies to politics, especially politics that's going to change the way the game's played. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about what the white gaze means, or what I think it means. The white gaze is a symptom of white supremacy, right? And the white gaze isn't just upheld or sustained or continued by white people, right? Just like white supremacy, multiple parties are responsible for upholding and maintaining a system, a structural system that impacts particularly people of color, Black people, right? In like Latinx communities, the first example of the white gaze that comes to mind are telenovelas, right? Like all the telenovelas, that's all white gaze, right? We might see, or we might feel seen because, like she's Mexican, she's Colombian, like national pride, but they're all light-skinned, blonde representations. And all of that is part of, again, just another symptom, another like present day action of like colonialism, right? And this aspiration for whiteness. And so I've seen that happen in writing, or we might do that in our own writing unintentionally, where we're trying to write for the white gaze, when we might limit our own writing in terms of like how many Spanish words can be in this like monolingual like manuscript, right? Or when we do the opposite, right? I'm gonna make this character sound very like use a particular dialect, right, to make it seem more ethnic or make them seem more street, right? That's catering to the white gaze. Because you're not seeing this character's humanity. They're not just an accent or a dialect. We do that also in our own writing when we write trauma porn, right? When we try to sensationalize our own experiences, that our characters need to suffer more pain in order for someone to sell it or for someone to read it, right? That's us keeping the white gaze in mind. When we don't write joy for our characters, when we don't write love for our characters, that's upholding the white gaze. And then it takes a lot of unlearning, right? Just the structure of the fiction, like narrative form, the narrative arc, that's upholding the white gaze and white supremacy, right? And so, yeah, right. And so it's, we uphold the white gaze in ways that we're not even conscious of. And it's constant, like I said, a constant unlearning, a constant revising of your work, constant like sharing to folks, like, am I pandering? What I try to do is, when I'm workshopping stories, I share it with folks that I want them to see themselves in it, right? And so I share it with my friends, like with my people, because yeah, that's really like my audience. And it's, if you can see this, and if you can like tell me honestly that I'm just pandering, or like being a fucking exagerada or whatever, like those are the kind of conversations I want to have with my writing. I was at a poetry reading with Dennis Smith last night, and one of the poems that he read was "My President," and it was a list poem, like of the people that are his president, and his presidents are the people in his community, right? The people who are their president are the people in their community, parents, grandparents, friends. And so when I'm writing against the white gaze, I see those people in my head, right? And so I try to keep that in mind. And again, it's a constant unlearning and a constant like check and balances, because we might be doing it unwillingly.
I would love to build on that from my own personal experience and what I grapple with, and I also like to push back a little bit. Well, actually, it's not really a pushback, because I don't think what I'm about to say you'll disagree with. It's just to complicate the notion of trauma porn, because I think we need to have a more nuanced conversation about what that is, because people are using that word, and I don't think we all using it the same way to point at the same things. But what I wanted to say is, definitely for me, another reason why I write, I know my work cannot have an impact on anybody else if it doesn't have an impact on me. So definitely for me, writing is a healing activity, and it's an unlearning activity. And for me, in terms of specific against the white gaze, it also means unpacking all the things that facilitate white supremacy, because it's white supremacy, it's not white supremacy by itself. Right? Supremacy is fueled by heteronormativity, it's fueled by ableism, it's fueled by patriarchy, it's all those things. And for me, as of late, because I give myself permission to allow my writing to heal myself as a way to be of service to my reader, I write to grapple with things. There was a time when, because I wanted so much of my work to have an impact, I was, and I still, I won't say that my work doesn't have a social justice lens, but one way that I have hopefully have grown as a writer and has been better able to service my readers is by coming to things with more questions than answers. Strong point of view, but still have more questions than answers. So one particular thing with the current work that I'm working on, which is a young adult novel inspired by the movement Say Her Name, which is about looking at the gendered aspects of the movement for Black Lives and Black Lives Matter, and recognizing the ways that when victims of racialized violence, and particularly police brutality, are women or non-binary or not trans, they need to become the perfect victims to get the same level of demand for justice. One of the things that I am grappling with a lot, and why I wanted to write this book, was my own respectability politics. The issue of, the perfect victim, and how and the notion that we are somehow complicit in our oppression. And because I know that is something that I still have to shed. So I'm hoping through the writing, not only am I shedding that, but as people read it, they will start to grapple with it too. So, and this brings me to the issue of trauma porn. One thing that I would really like, marginalized communities, but particularly the Latinx community, for us to, it's an ongoing conversation. We're not going to resolve it here, but for us to have a much more nuanced conversation about the fact that, yes, while we absolutely need to have our romances and our comedies and our speculative fiction and our horror stories and our mysteries, while we have to show the diversity in our community, in terms of, yes, let's see the lawyers and the doctors and the people who are English dominant and don't speak Spanish, etc. While those people absolutely deserve to be seen, we have to be careful that in pushing for those broader images, we're not doing it in a way that frames it as if the immigrant, the single mother, the drug dealer, the person who's incarcerated is the problem. And those people in our community exist. And I feel that our jobs as artists is to complicate them and to put their choices in social, political, economic context, right? If we're gonna write against the white gaze, if we're gonna write against patriarchy, if we're gonna write against heteronormativity, then you complicate. It's not that you erase those people. It's not just say, no more mothers on welfare, no more people in the underground economy, no more sex workers. What you do is you still tell those stories, but you complicate them, and you show why their personal choices are impacted by white supremacist, heteronormative, patriarchal capitalism. So that's why, and sometimes when people, and I know that like, this wasn't you, but thank you for opening it, like when people use that term trauma porn, a lot of it is about wanting to silence those stories. And I'm not saying those should not be the only stories. I understand the fear of people feeling that telling those stories are stereotyping, but when you're saying that we should not tell those stories at the expense of the middle class educated professional, then what you're doing is you're saying that those people are the problem when they're not, and you're trying to erase them. We need all those stories.
I like, Sophia, that you said complicate stories instead of humanizing. Because I think that's been like the language around Cummings' book about putting a face to the faceless and humanizing, giving a voice to the voiceless, right? When we say we're humanizing a group with our writing, that's also pandering to the white gaze, right? If white supremacy doesn't see our humanity, right? It's not our job to try to have them see our humanity. We have a humanity. We are human. And so I like that you use that word, right? It's about sharing complicated stories.
I love Sophia's use of the introduction of the word complication in this myself. As a Salvadoreño who has 30 years in this, how I came to the fight against American dirt, beyond Miriam's lovely essay and her leadership in this, is the fact that I've been on the migrant trail for 30 years. I've seen things that I would not wish on anyone, like seeing a house after it's been bombed, full of children. To see the last remaining thing of the child, their skin grafted into the walls. Or to see children and mothers so desperate they climb on this monster train called La Bestia. It's primarily a Central American story, but Jeanine Cummins turned it into a Mexican story. And on top of that, a really crappy and sloppily done story. It's very complicated. We have to complicate these narratives. I mean, and, I've seen what the skin of a child looks like when it's been ripped up by barbed wire. And then to see barbed wire on the book of the cover of the book. To see nail art in the shape of barbed wire. And to see a lobster dinner celebrating this book with a centerpiece that was made of barbed wire was, in addition to Miriam's brilliance and just rage against the machine, was what drove me after 30 years to fight the cartoon that they were trying to impose upon us as if it was great literature. And one other thing about these issues that I've been on for all this time, I've gone to see the children. I've seen them when they have the little scars on their necks from trying to hang themselves. I've seen their mother's scars. How many of you have seen any Central American writers in English? How many? Most of this story on immigration in the United States. Which one?
I'm one.
Okay.
And I'm one.
Right. Have you seen any books in English about? No, you won't. You haven't. People say, but what about Valeria Luiselli? No. She's Mexican and she's grew up in, I believe, in Mexico City. And God bless her work. She's a good writer, great writer, but she's not Salvadoreña. And there's things that she can't understand about us. Carolyn Forche, prize-winning. All these Central American stories are getting prizes, but none of them by Central Americans. They're getting big, so at a material basis. We have to complicate it. And I'll just take you one step further, given my journalistic experience. I went to those places. I've been to the cages. I've gone to South Texas, just an hour from where Julian Castro, for 8 years, managed to not go and take teddy bears like he did when Trump was putting kids in jail and putting them in cages. 1 hour from where Julian Castro was, he didn't go to the cages. He didn't go to the concentration camps. He didn't go see the children slitting their wrists and trying to hang themselves. I did. And I talked about it, but what happened when I would pitch the story to some white liberal editors with the white liberal gaze? What happened when I would pitch those stories? Not a good time, Roberto. Maybe later. So it's complicated because, I mean, how many of you believe to cage children, to push them to suicide, to push them to the most horrific deaths imaginable in the deserts of Sonora? How many of you think that's fascistic? It's not fascistic? What is it? If you believe it's fascistic, then are you willing to say Donald Trump is a fascist? Yes. Then are you willing to say Barack Obama is a fascist because he mass-produced it by the tens of thousands? Are you willing to go there? Because that's how far you need to go to get at the truth of this story right now. This is what drove me to support the mounting of a campaign to take on one of the titans of U.S. publishing alongside Miriam and alongside David. So it's very complicated.
Ooh, it's getting hot in here. Pa lo que vinimos.
Journalist Tina Velasquez had a piece surrounding American Dirt where she talked about that, yes, all this conversation is important, but the face of immigration right now isn't Mexican, right? It's Central Americans. And that's been an aspect that has been missing in this conversation about Jeanine Cummins' book, right? Not only was it just a terrible, stereotypical book, right, but it was lauded, right, as this, like, the immigration book, when that's not what's happening in our country presently, right? And yeah, we're celebrating, as you were mentioning, we're celebrating Mexican authors writing about Central Americans, giving them MacArthur Genius Awards, and the Central American community has been protesting that and has been saying, how are white Mexicans writing our stories, getting the awards about us? Well, not us, I'm Mexican, right? But about Central American community, right?
On behalf of the Central American people,
Thank you. Thank you. I'll take it. Yes, I'll take it. Right, and so, right, but the Latinx community, the Latinx publishing community was not listening. We're not listening. We keep putting these authors on these must-read books. If you're looking at the reading lists that are coming out, like, don't read American Dirt, read these immigration books. That book is on there. This book about conversations, this book that was then turned into fiction about these conversations, right? And so, like, we also need to hold ourselves accountable, our communities accountable for upholding the white gaze and supporting white supremacy and rewarding, right, our aim at whiteness.
And I think we have to make it safer amongst ourselves to own the ignorance that we have about each other. I'm going to be honest, I can't say that I could have picked up a book like American Dirt and knew what the stereotypes and the cliches were and the mistakes were. Oh, that was the wrong word, or that's not the practice that belongs to that culture. As a Puerto Rican Dominican born and raised with my U.S. privilege, I can't honestly say that. I would need someone who knows better. Right. And I think we need to make it safe for us to and take on being willing to learn about each other, and challenging ourselves to, okay, of course I want to champion authors from my same ethnic background, but I also have to read other backgrounds in the Latinx community, and that goes not only about Latinx identity, but read queer Latinx authors, read disabled Latinx authors, and read immigrant and undocumented Latinx authors, and challenge ourselves that way to learn more about each other, and to so that what we're doing gets just past ethnic cheerleading. Because we should want to do more than just be seen. We should also want to give birth to the excellence that exists in our community. So it isn't, well, I'm just going to tell my story and that's good, but it is good. It's a start. but let's also be striving for and supporting each other in creating like that powerful moving craft. And again, because that's also against the white gaze.
Yes.
Because they've already questioned our ability to do that. This is why they want to get white authors to tell our story. This is why they don't see us as human until a white person stands up and says, hey, they're human. Can I write about them? Right? So I just like to put that kind of out there too, and to support each other in learning about each other and making it safe to ask difficult questions and to learn, you know, and to teach each other.
We're going to shift gears. So I really appreciate what you were saying, Sophia, about giving birth to the excellence of our culture, because with that piece, Pendeja, You Ain't Steinbeck, my bronca with fake-ass social justice literature, when Miriam Gulba, there was the takedown of all takedowns, with all takedowns of all takedowns. And yes, we should be applauding Miriam. It was brave. It was brave. Miriam could have put her literary career on the line by coming out and speaking the truth about this story that offended her. She used the word on NPR yesterday, on Democracy Now!, gross, that it was gross. You know, there was just no other like word for her to describe how the tropes and the stereotypical characterization, it was just gross, you know, and that's not giving birth to the excellence of our culture, right? And so we have to, now let's look at the effects of this movement, right, in the publishing industry. I'm really curious, Sophia, you have been published by many of the major publishing houses, right? What has been, for a minute, let's talk about that, right? Because now we're in a different place. Let's give some context to why this takedown is so important, why this Dignidad Literaria movement is so significant right now.
I think one thing that I hope will come from, first of all, that it is a continued movement, that it's not just a moment in time where this one thing happened, and that it's not just around this book. One of the things that Dignidad Literaria has done that I really, really appreciated is really focusing on the structural issues and making it, and this book is an example. It is not the only thing. It's only about, oh, take this book off the shelves and we're good. But really demanding structural change, and that's really, really important. There was something else I want to say, but I'm gonna let you. But I did want to acknowledge that it is a movement, and that it continues, and that it grows. And this is what I wanted to say, that we're careful that what doesn't happen is then again you still have just a handful of people who become the literary luminaries, and that other people don't get the opportunity to publish. What has to change is not only diversifying the staff of a publishing house. What also has to change is how talent is found and how talent is cultivated. So if the only way a major publishing house is going to find talent is if you need to be agented, there's a lot of undiscovered gems out there who will never have their stories unpublished. So if you're only looking at the MFA programs to find the excellence in our community, that's just going to perpetuate the problems, and you're going to get a couple of folks who can get through, and then you're going to have this continued elitism. And that has to change. If you are paying, an assistant a wage that is not livable, that is also why publishing is so white. Because who can go in there and, unless someone else is paying your rent or you got that kind of support or resources, there's a lot of people in our community who are never going to be able to get that starting position and work their way up. So these are the structural things that we have to talk about in terms of access. And otherwise, what will happen is we will make some changes, but we will still have, okay, so we will have an uptick in the number of Latinx authors, and maybe they'll be more diverse, but we really won't have the groundswell that we need and deserve, especially in this political moment, in this political climate.
So I think, thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. And yeah, we definitely need more mobility, and hopefully, right, this movement will sustain and take many of us with it. What I wanted to add to what you had said about so the critic, right, or the first critic of, right, Pendeja, like, you're not Steinbeck, right? Steinbeck has its own fucking issues in the first place, but also, like, she's not only, like, putting her literary career on the line, but her, like, physical life. Yes. Right? And so when Flatiron put out this, like, press of, like, oh, we're canceling because death threats, right? And then it came out that, like, nobody was threatening her fucking life. But yeah, like, these critics that have been going up against this system getting, like, real death threats, but not their lives not being taken seriously, is an issue, right? That even when we do speak up, we're putting our lives on the line, and nobody sees us even then. And so it's very painful and brave, right, to be able to be carrying that movement. So again, thank you to you and to David and to, like, all the others that are pushing it forward. I saw on Twitter that, like, Dignidad Literaria, someone had said, right, that it's what is happening in the YA world and children's lit world going into, like, the adult fiction world, right? Because it's on the heels of, like, we need diverse books, right, own voices, right, with, like, YA and, like, children's lit scholars and writers and illustrators constantly having to fight against the erasure or the misrepresentation, right, of people of color and children YA books, right? And so, and the people that are doing that work, I mean, on a daily basis, right, being threatened on social media, and so it's not just a single moment, right, but again, also just acknowledging, like, our history, that we have been doing this. And so hopefully, right, that this moment with this big book, the publishing industry, right, will see that there are audiences, there are people that are interested, and it's structural, right, that it's structural, and it's not just going to be like, let's create, we need 10 books, and then once we've met our 10 authors, we're done with our diversity. We'll see you next year with the next shitty book. Which, I mean, the publishing industry didn't take a break, right? We had Jeanine Cummins, and then it was like, let's just blackface all the classics. Yep. Like, they could.
And we slammed them the next day.
Right, and so, like, they're just.
and as the kids say, they thought they did something.
They thought they really did. They thought they did something.
Hey, does anybody want me to share a little bit of our meeting with you?
Yes, that's what we want to hear. Yes.
All right, I'm going to share an anecdote, all right? All right, so this is all off the record, even though it's being recorded and beamed out. Don't say shit. If anybody says anything, I'm going to go and take you down next, man. All right, so, no, but it was a cordial meeting. It was respectful. It was serious. And you had this delegation led by this 5-foot Chicana school teacher who took a break from teaching her classes, meeting with these top people at U.S. Publishing. It's like kind of cool that way. And it was that in and of itself was unprecedented, just to give that kind of respect. But we didn't just go there to get respect. We went there to get the goods. And the goods defined different ways. It's not just about reforming the system. To all my and our leftist friends back there who have been on my ass on Twitter saying, hey, you know, what are you doing, Lovato? You're involved in this reformist stuff just to get more jobs and books. And I'm like, hey, man, go read my book and all the stuff that I've seen in life. And the way that the death, the truly, truly abysmal death holding mass graves that I've seen and other stuff that you'll read if you read my book. There's a component that I learned from El Salvador early on, which was that in order to have somebody dead and mangled and dismembered in a mass grave, what do you have to do to them first? What do you have to do to them? No, before you kill them. Discredit? What else? Dehumanize. Who said that? That's the A+ answer right there. That was an A. Carolina got an A. That was an A+. You have to dehumanize them. You have to remove. There's something about human beings that we can't kill somebody if we believe they're human, which is why that thing you see in those cheesy movies where, hey, please, I have a wife, I have a kids, is actually true. I've actually, I haven't done that, but I've been in situations where I've explained to people that I was a human being before they pulled a trigger to kill me. So this is real. So the story you tell about a human being matters, that has material effects. And so to my lefty friends, get with the program, get with the literary storytelling, dehumanizing versus humanizing aspect of whatever revolutionary struggle you are a part of. So with that, so we're in the meeting. We're in the meeting, and they're visibly, we got their attention. You know, we have 11 cities this week mobilizing. And so going into that meeting, part of the strategy, to be really frank, was to have these 11 meetings and be like kind of that spear you have on the table. Hey, don't look at the spear, just know that it's there. We're having it this week, and the spear can either be a celebratory spear or it could be something else, bro. It's your choice. It's how you do it. It's negotiation, it's strategy, it's, so things were going well, and then we went into the meeting saying, look, we do not want to talk about what? The book. Thank you for not saying the name. Somebody said Jeanine Cummins. You traumatized me with that. All right? So, all right? So like, no, but we said, we're not here to talk about Jeanine Cummins or that book, dude. We're here to talk about you and us. Yes. And so somebody brought up Jeanine Cummins. They shouldn't have done that. It broke into some tension. But out of that tension came out a truth that Jeanine Cummins did not get death threats. Miriam Gerba got death threats the whole time. I was getting text messages with these from her, and we were talking it through and, trying to figure out how we document and deal with this. And so, and I'm here sitting, I've been pursued by death squads, I kid you not, on both sides of the border. And you're going to tell me this is a big, and their first book that they closed, first book event that they closed, you know where it was? It was in the massive brown barbarian enclave of Corte Madera, California. A town that has the demographics of Montana. And so they closed this, and this was the kind of thing where, from a strategic standpoint, it was obvious, oh man, if these folks are willing to go, these are white liberals, but you're talking publishing, you're dealing with primarily with white liberals, some reactionaries who are publishing reactionary books. But they're willing to go Trump to get out of a situation, it seems. And at that point, as a chess player, you know what? Check. Right? So that's just a little anecdote I wanted to share about kind of the ways that, Miriam handled herself magnificently, and the conversation took a turn to where we reached a point where we got, just to be clear with everyone, what we got was a commitment from them within 90 days to make structural changes within the company in terms of hires, not just authors, but other parts of the production process, numbers of books, and other parts of what they called the Macmillan ecosystem. So this transcended not just Jeanine Cummins, who's in the dirt and dust of that book, but also it went to beyond Flatiron to Macmillan itself. And so we inserted in there a 30-day check-in. So we're going to invite like Dominican writers to join us, who magnificent, by the way. The Caribeñas in the house just delivered for us when we made the call to, hey, man, we need some backup, y'all. And just un aplauso really
we had your back,
Angie.
yo.
They had our back
Hard.
Had our back hard. So we will be having, I don't know if it's Angie, whoever. Angie's really shy. She's got to overcome this. But I want to have Angie at the table with us. They have asked us to bring in other groups. So we're going to bring into these 30-day check-in negotiations. We're going to bring other groups. We're going to give them a list. But last thing I'll say is esto no acaba aquí.
Right.
There are still children in cages.
Yes.
There are still mothers and children being pushed to the most horrific deaths imaginable. There are still colonial problems, believe it or not, in Puerto Rico. There are still U.S. products of the cancer of U.S. policy in Dominican Republic.
Yes.
They're still overthrowing governments in Bolivia, Honduras, Venezuela. You have, for the last, since 2006 through the Obama era to the present, Mexico becoming just one massive mass grave of hundreds of thousands of people. So all this has an unstoried element to it, an untold story. So esto a pura pena empieza, and I bring that up because in addition to celebrating a victory, we have to kind of like hunker down for a long-term fight against
It's a fight.
silence.
It's a fight.
Yeah, it's a fight.
There's a movement.
Yeah. So, Vic, by the way, movement, as a student of movements, I can tell you that movements are defined in part by victories.
Yes, and we are victorious.
We had a victory. We have to
This week.
celebrate it
Yep.
and then move on
And keep moving.
and build on it.
I was gonna open up to Q&As,
Oh.
but you want to say something?
Well, you asked what changes do we want to see,
Yeah, what do we wanna
right?
see?
To come out of this, and one of the things that that we want to see is publishers reaching out to the communities, and they did that with Angie's book, late in the game, but they did it. Veronica and I were asking them for ARCs. They were taking all their time. Can you believe that? They were taking all their time to send ARCs of Dominican, right, to a Dominican community, and especially us, known as Dominican Writers Association, right? Because we were doing, organizing Angie's book launch. But they were compliant with ideas that we had, and whenever and they paid for everything, so everything came out really nice. And I was particularly shocked at how much they let us do, because publishing houses don't usually reach out like that. But you know, we got the first 2 chapters of Dominicana translated, and we picked a Dominican author to do it because we didn't want anyone else who wasn't Dominican to and wouldn't understand the nuances and the complexities of being Dominican. And we really, you know, we picked the person. Veronica said, "Who do we know?" And we found that person. And so they obliged with that. They printed all the first 2 chapters and they passed them out. And we filled the Alianza Dominicana with 200 plus supporters and community members and readers, and to me that's I live for that, because my whole point is to show that Dominican writers are lit. Literally, we are read, right? So not just because Angie is from Uptown, but because people are purchasing the books. I mean, just before I got here, I saw that Word Up put up the top sold books in the store, and among them were 3 Dominicans. So, you know, we are selling books, right? We are selling books. It's just that, you know, the publishing houses are not doing their due diligence. With Jeanine Cummins, I said, oh, my God, they couldn't have found a Mexican editor?
No, but she edited the help. What's wrong? What's your problem?
You know.
Bringing up a good point again about how everything has to change, because why is it that was an unusual thing? Why is it that was an unusual thing? Because they're also not valuing our community as readers.
Yes, exactly.
They're like they are looking for the white dollars.
Right.
And that's another part of the problem. They're not looking to us.
I said American Dirt was not written for us. It was not written for Latinos. It was written for white people, and they are loving this book because they are completely ignorant. They don't notice the linguistical errors or the nuances, the stereotyping. They don't know because they're not Mexicans and they're not Latinos, and they've never experienced any of this. So it goes over their head. So when we complain, we come off as jealous. We're not getting the 7-figure book deal. We come off as bitter. What are we complaining about? You know, Sandra Cisnero completely disappointed me and said we are exaggerados. You know, Jeanine Cummins was bringing the Trojan horse to white people, and she was going to disrupt everything and show white people that, you know, migrants are human. So that's insulting to us when even one of our own says something like that. But
Why do you hate America, Angie?
I don't hate America, but going back to what I was saying is that publishers need to pull resources from the community. Google, you will find people who can help you elevate this book and sell this book. Oprah can be possibly the biggest, influencer, but there's many others. Bookstagrammers. Who are you sending your books to? Are you sending your books just to white bookstagrammers, or are you sending it to the Latino community? We're out there. We exist. We're blogging. We're writing about books. If you go on Instagram, you'll find a slew of people who are reviewing books. We review books. It's out there. The resources are out there. The alleys are out there. They're just not. They just don't give a shit about looking for them. That's what I'm going to say, because I don't think there's any excuse for that. You just got to jump on Google, go on Twitter, go, Instagram if you have an Instagram account. Anyway, check the hashtag. There's no excuse for it.
Angie, there's children watching online, Angie. Please help me.
My son is used to me.
As the founder of the New York City Latina Writers Group, when we went to the press conference in support of Dignidad Literaria, one of the things that for me was important to say that in our collective, there are over 800 writers, Latina writers in this organization, women of color writers in our collective. And so you mean to tell me that in this group, combined with the 1,500 Dominican writers that Angie has in the Dominican Writers Association, you can't find one writer that can tell an authentic, truthful story? It's lazy. It's lazy. It's lazy.
When we write our truth, they overlook us.
Right.
But when you
No one will buy that.
Right, no one will buy it. But if you put it in fiction and you sensationalize it, we could sell
a hot
this.
topic.
Well, before we even get to that, the assumption is, right, that our stories are not universal. Right. So, and that is where like the dehumanization comes in, right? Because the assumption is if I, as a Puerto Rican, write about a Puerto Rican, they're thinking, well, who else is going to read that about Puerto Ricans, and how are we going to get back our money? Mm-hmm. So the assumption is that someone who's not Puerto Rican can't read that book and be moved and touched by it and see some aspects of themselves in it. They only believe that our stories are universal when someone outside of our experience validates it. Yeah. And that's part of the problem. So that's why when a white author says, I've decided that I should write a book about, a Mexican migrant. Then like, then you know what? If this person outside this experience saw something to capture her interest, her passion, her empathy, there must be something here that'll appeal to everyone. But when we want to tell our own stories, then it's niche and not universal. And any artist worth their salt will tell you that you get through the universal through the specifics. But that's true but that has been only true for white artists and not for marginalized communities.
She is the boss.
And then we're going to do
why do you even put that mic down?
You know what's really beautiful? You know what's really beautiful right now about movements? Movements will do this. Is another sign when you have a movement, when you kind of take these paradigmatic relationships, right? Paradigmatic being a set of beliefs reinforced by a group of practitioners. It's kind of like Thomas Coyne, old philosopher guy, I remember said that. So you have this set of beliefs and it's reinforced. It's not just the publishers. It's also the critical class. Mm-hmm. So has anybody gone and looked at the reviews of American Dirt on these aggregator, what is it called? You're the person with the that beautiful initiative, right, for writers of color? Oh, minorities. That's it. So what's the name of that that aggregator of critiques of books, book criticism? You can go in on this page and you can see all the reviews that are written. Like Rotten Tomatoes for books. Something like that, where there's one, it's not Goodreads, it's like these, you can go and see the critics in the papers. I went and you see all of them, and something like 60 to 70%. No, whatever they are, green, purple, but they wrote about American Dirt in the most glowing, Steinbeckian, so moving, on the ground realism, gritty, deep. And I'm here with 30 years of this, like, damn, dude. These people are getting off on a cartoon. So, like, the beautiful thing is that whole system has been exposed. Oh yeah, but the question is, hey man, I read it. It's not gritty, but
really remember whether
she read the book. Let's open it up. Q&A. Q&A. Let's go. Yes. Yes. There's a question over here. Yeah. Can you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, thank you for such remarkable panel. I'm Guatemalan American, actually. I know you. You may not remember me. It's okay.
I'm canceled, bad. Fuck.
No worries. I am a Chapina American I came here looking for answers, and I got them. Thank you. I think it's important, and I want to thank Sophia for giving us that language, and Sonia, everyone really, like defining white gaze, because we need to unpack and like give it a name and define it. And also just this idea of naming also the extremes. So I'm just going to go straight to my question, which unfortunately does like have to entail with, it's a little bit personal, but just for the sake of example, myself, I know that sounds selfish, but this has made me stop writing. It made me not want to write, precisely because I was afraid of, wow, what if my story is precisely what the white gaze wants? Going back to trauma porn and giving that a name also, right, and defining that. So what can you offer to the emerging writer who hasn't published much, who is, I'm out there, but I'm like not, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm mad local. But hey, what can you give, what, and I know at the risk of sounding like y'all are not therapists, right? But like, what cognitive tools can you give to us who have this internal conflict, this internal monologue of like, I got into Tin House, but did they like my story because it was like, And so how do you fight that? Like, and I know the answer probably is like, fuck it, trust yourself and trust your story. But perhaps part of, I'm asking y'all, like, what if the unlearning process also entails, how can we trust ourselves and our stories? Because I do fear that, and it is my truth, you know, I'm not gonna name it, right? It's my truth, but it also happens to be a story that like deals with like the welfare office, and then I fear, I'm like, damn. And this is why I love, Sophia, what you said about like, let's not erase them, let's fucking give them depth. So thank you for that. But yeah, that's my question, and thank you.
It's a super valid question.
I hope this is helpful. One thing I always tell writers that I'm mentoring or editing or coaching is allow the first draft to be just for you. So if you feel yourself that you're struggling with wondering how your work is going to be received, when you're writing that first draft and you're trying to discover how to structure it and what to tell, the first draft is for you. And you can always decide afterwards what you choose to keep, what you choose to share, what you save for yourself. But if as you are discovering the layers of your story, because you will find new things. You will walk into it thinking that you already know where it goes. Okay, I've got this outline. This is the beginning. This is the middle. This is the turn. This is the end. But through the writing, you're going to discover so much more. You're also going to grow as a writer. And as you grow as a writer, you will go back and change things. So give yourself permission that you are writing for you. And you can later worry about an audience. But if you're worried about an audience now, it doesn't matter if it's white gaze or for your own folks or whatever. You are not going to allow your voice to blossom. And again, I'm a real big believer in allowing your work to heal you. Because if you are writing a scene that is supposed to be sad and you're not moved to tears, it's not going to have that impact on your writer. If you're writing a scene that's supposed to be funny and you're not rolling on the floor in tears, then it's not going to impact your write. So you are your own best barometer of the impact of your work, which is why you've got to allow yourself to give it permission to move and touch you and heal you and impact you before anybody else. So I hope that's helpful.
Take another question.
Oh, can I say, because she's Guatemalan, one of my peeps, Central American, and we never get to say anything. But no, I think the thing I said about the dream is critical. I teach a class sometimes called Strategy for Writers. And you proceed from the dream outward. You got to be very clear on what the dream of your essay, of your story. And the more clear about your dream you are, the kind of the way, the dream's the way to organize your subconscious. You know, and if you have a real clear dream, it's like love. It's like undeniable fury and passion that is unstoppable, right? So when you have that, you're tapping into your inner Sheena, your inner, Watala, or whatever your inner thing is, right? Your power. And so if you have that clear, then you can move outward, get a mentor that you trust that reinforces and understands that. Because our own people can be part of the colonial process and say, honestly, your shit sucks, right? And they'll say it with coded language and pseudo love. Yeah, I didn't get it. What are you talking about? So I don't want to name some, because some people here are my critics in the room. They're my worst critic, my friends, but I'm not going to go there. But
I do appreciate the question about emerging writers, because I think it's important, right? Like in this movement in particular, it's not just about the seasoned writers, it's about the people who will stop writing at go because of what's happening in the why bother. Right. Sonia and I have talked about all the rejections. Like, we've been on the phone countless times. They said no. And that shit eats at you, because you feel like, is my writing shit? They make you feel like you're nothing, like your story doesn't matter. And so I'm really passionate about that, like protecting my folks and their stories.
Yeah. I wanted to echo you because, I do writing workshops, and 9 times out of 10, it's not about craft, it's about permission, right? When you get a group of writers in the room, they're not looking necessarily for a bunch of craft talk. They're looking for validation, in the stuff that they're writing. And if they run up against a literary industry that does the kind of shit that they do, this is exactly what happens. So as teachers, that's what we have to do. I wanted to ask a question about capitalism, because the thing, my bad, but the thing, first of all, I'm glad you mentioned Toni Morrison, because running out of the house, I grabbed this book called Giant Talk, which has Toni Morrison in it, John Oliver Killens, Robert Hayden, Cesar Vallejo, Chinua Achebe, Sonia Sanchez, Lucille Clifton. It's a who's who. It's a who's who. This book was published in 1975, okay, by Random House. So they have models for this stuff already. It's not like this stuff, just popped up out of nowhere, right? Once upon a time, they went to authors, to authors like this, of this caliber, editors of this caliber, like Quincy Troop and Rainer Schulte, right? Looking for this kind of literature. They went to Nicolas Amor and said, can you write us this book called Nilda, which is like something that I think a lot of us kind of grew up on, right? And Perry Thomas and all these other amazing writers that kind of come up in El Barrio and the Bronx and everywhere else. So, my question is about that, because you mentioned the word entertainment. And I think one of the problems that we have with the white gaze is that, for the most part, you look at books as sort of an escape from, I don't know what the hell it is, some sort of this beaver cleaver type of existence, which we know is bullshit anyway, right? But two, when you're talking about the Latinx tradition in literature, like, there is no separation between the politics and the literature. This is what we do. This is our voice, and that's why it's important. And that's also why there are presses like Kitchen Table Press, right, which was led by a group of black women, black feminist women, right, black lesbian women, who took their stories and made them important and published it for themselves, and, by the way, became commercially viable. It's just a question now of scaling up. So, and by the way, the editor who shepherded this book through Random House was Toni Morrison, right? So my question is, to what extent when we get in the room with these folks 30 days from now, 90 days from now, are we ready to kind of lower the boom on them and help them understand that the Latinx tradition in publishing is an activist tradition. It is a disruptive tradition. It's a global tradition that's already been here, and it's their turn now to kind of help us scale it up, right? How much are they going to really take back the public service aspect of what they do, and maybe lose at least a little bit of the focus toward making millions and millions of dollars for Oprah Winfrey?
We need your help right now, actually. That's a good question. We're getting reports right now that, we made overtures to Oprah Winfrey, Oprah. We've made overtures to say, look, we want to talk with you because of your role in U.S. literature. You've only had one person of Latino, Caribeño extraction in 20 years. And you may not be the best person to moderate a discussion between Latinx peoples and the industry, which is our interest, because she's talking about this all sides, and she doesn't want to. I'm getting word from inside their operation, and from around places in different parts of the country that they're having these discussions. That it seems like they want to bring in people who are part of what I call the folklorico industrial complex, right? Yeah. So you all know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to name any names. I'm not wearing a huipil or any shit like that. But needless to say, there's a divide and conquer element that we are vigilant of, because all of us that founded this, somos de izquierda. We draw from some of the great political traditions in the Puerto Rican community, the Dominican community, independistas, from the Dominican tradition of Luis, ¿cómo se llama? Luis, the singer. Huh? Luis Diaz. So I've learned about from my friend. Oh, hell yeah. I'm into Silvio Rodriguez and all this, Mercedes Sosa. So we're Chicano tradition, Salvadoran tradition, Guatemala. We're drawing on the left traditions of our community. That's what's fueling this. So we're going to need help right now as we approach Oprah, if we need to, so that this doesn't finish. And so we want to engage Oprah in a serious, we could have her, maybe do the role of her role as a person who is a moderator and a mediator, but we have to do it on our terms. And our terms is that there's not all sides. There's only two sides. There's the titans of publishing industry, like her, and there's a community of 60 million people that has been systematically excluded from the publishing equation of the United States that is now starting to die. So the choice is theirs. So we need your help. Be vigilant. Stay with that hashtag, Dignidad Literaria, and help us to because we depend on the barbarian masses that you all are, that are willing to storm Rome, man. We're excluded. We're marginalized. We have nothing to lose. This is why we're being effective. Because they know we're marginalized, and they know we have nothing to lose. We're not coming in and being like talking civil rights and diversity and all these dead language, right? We talk about class and economics and things like our communist friend here talks about.
Let's take these two last questions.
I wanted to add something to what Roberto said. Now that in 30 days we're supposed to come up with a list, what I call is a list of demands. I also feel that as writers, when we are about to sign that contract, that we should demand certain things, because it is our book. I mean, some writers have no say on their book cover, or who the artist of their book cover is, or who their editor is going to be, or who's going to be the team that's going to take care of your book and make sure that it gets to where you want it to get. Sometimes we don't have that choice. And as writers, I always tell people, let us know who you want to work with. Because I feel that's important, that you work with people that, if you have supporters in your community or editors in your community that you want to work with, that you should share that information. And if they need to come on as a consultant, then pay them.
Next question.
Hi, so my name is Freddie. I'm a Salvi writer, and one of the things that I've been dealing with lately as someone who is actively pitching and being published, I've had the fortunate blessing of working with of color editors, which I'm really grateful for. But I'm personally dreading working with white ones. So what kind of advice could you offer someone who's hustling in the industry and will come up against white editors, face pushback in writing? How did you guys deal with editors who maybe weren't an ally to you, and how did you navigate that in the industry yourselves?
I would never accept a white editor.
So when
Right, but sometimes there's magazines and things like that, and they're there, and they're who you're trying to get to.
First of all, I had to self-publish, period. My book, Finding Your Force, A Journey to Love, had at least 500 times I used the word fuck, and nobody was trying to publish that book, right? And so, yes, right, because who says that word? And so I sent over 175 emails, over 175. I have every single one. And I got 2 emails back. All of them were rejections, kind of, all of them, right? But I got 2 emails where the editor was really honest and kind. We can't publish this. You would have to lose all of these fuck words that, I mean, it's like, it's just part of it's my voice, right? Saying the word fuck it's part of who I am and how I speak. It's how I found my fucking force. Yes. And so how do you deal with editors? I feel like white editors, we're talking about white editors, you have to understand that 90% of the time they're not going to get it. Like, we're expecting to find people who, are woke and get our stories. And we're not writing it for them, so I think, I don't want to say have a tough skin, because we're human beings, we're people, right? And we want to be seen, and the shit hurts. I think it's going in knowing that the experience is going to be challenging, and how are you going to be able to take care of yourself after getting 173? Nah, we don't want this,
I'm trying to think if all my editors have been white. Because I have been, if it's probably, right? No, because there are some, at least African American, and at one point, Johanna Castillo, when we did Juicy Mangoes, was the editor of that, and she brought Michelle in. I think if you're talking about mainstream publishing and you're talking about books, the reality is until we start to make these structural changes that this movement is intended and determined to make, chances are you are going to get a white editor. What may be what's in your favor is that if someone has made an offer to you, they do see something in your work that they value. And I think, and hopefully you'll get multiple offers, so you can vet people and feel and see who is the one that is going to honor your voice and is really going to work with you in a collaborative spirit, who doesn't want you to change the very thing that got them intrigued about your work. And to think about that more than what advance you're going to get or what the royalty structure is. What's really more important is this person, when they give you feedback on your work, and you ultimately say, no, I want to keep this is because, is going to honor that. And who really, their job is the litmus test is their job to, as an editor, facilitate the story that you want to tell, not to try to make you tell the story that they think you should be telling. Yes. And that is an instinctual decision. So my hope for anyone who wants to go this route, the mainstream publishing route, where until we make these changes, your chances are your editor is going to be white, is that you will have options, and that you vet those options, and you remember, if they see something in you, you're the one with the power. You're the one that has the content that they want. So don't sell that short and think like, ooh, I've got to play nice and make all these changes. No, but because they want they want your material. So always keep that in mind, that you've got that leg up. You've gotten to a place where so many of us are trying to get to that haven't gotten there. So to have that honoring of your own voice, and that, like, are you here to help me make a better writer, telling the story that I want to tell, and not change the story. And I've got to be honest, because I think, and you brought this up, there are very, very few people of color, in the publishing industry and in the editors and whatever, but not everyone, just because they look like us, validates our story. I remember my first novel, the idea of I had a Latina agent, and there are more Latinx agents out there, and I was enamored of the idea of being teamed with a Latinx editor, and that person rejected my story. And the reason that I got was, I never forgot it. You don't forget these things. The reason that I got was, my story was about two young women in hip hop, best friends, a rhyme duo that got split up, that were turned into rivals because they got divided by a shady record label, right? And one of the characters was African American, Afro-Caribbean, and her best friend and rhyme partner was Puerto Rican. And I had this Latina editor tell me that part of the backstory of the Puerto Rican character was that she grew up in the foster care system. And I was told that, she said, well, she didn't feel Latina. I had a Latina editor tell me that my Latina character didn't feel Latina to her because she didn't have 3 generations up in her house. I mean, of course, I'm paraphrasing. She didn't say that. But basically it was like, she didn't feel real to me because where is her family? And I'm like, and I'm someone who grew up in a home. My parents were foster parents. And so from the time that I was 11 years old to the time I went to college, through college, I always had foster sisters. And I had foster sisters, and the majority of them were Latinas. So again, and this is why I push about that thing about stereotypes, and because that was erasing all those. That was but I was also erasing that reality. I don't know what the exact statistic is, but I think right now in New York City, I think maybe 1 out of 4 children is Latinx in the foster care system. I know it's a high number. So they don't get to be seen. They don't get to read a book and see themselves in a book. To bring back like why we write, right? And stories can be an escape. Stories can be a vision of what can be. And stories can also be an affirmation of what it is, and a mirror to that. Your reality is real. When we erase them, we don't let that, then basically we're involved in cultural gaslighting. So, just if by that point you got someone making an offer on your work, then they saying that you have a certain power because they want your work. So once you get into that relationship with that editor, then it's about, hey, you're here to cultivate me, to help me make the best story. You already knew what my goal was when you signed on to this. And I chose you because I believe you, and it's a conversation. I've been fortunate that I've had editors that got that. Rich reminded me about this experience on Twitter about the biggest challenges that I had have been with the occasional copy editor. When my characters are speaking Spanglish, or they're speaking African American, vernacular English, or slang, whatever, wanting to turn my Spanish into Spanish. And wanting to put all those D's back in my past participles. I'm like, we don't say hablado, we say hablado, and trying to do that. We say pegado, not pegado. To us, it's pegado.
This is my issue with translation, that they don't understand that Spanish is not a universal language.
Can you take the mic? Sorry.
Sorry, I was saying that one of my issues with translations is that publishers don't understand that Spanish is not a universal language. In DR, we speak Spanish differently. In Puerto Rico, we speak it different. And in El Salvador, in Colombia, Venezuela, we all have different words that we use that it's not, doesn't even have the same meaning. Like we say guagua, and that's a bus, but you go to Honduras and you say guagua, that's a little girl. So it's very different, you know. One of the things recently that I was upset at was that they translated Elizabeth Acevedo's book and they sent it to Madrid to translate, and I was like, fuck. I was like, why do you, out of all places, you send it to Madrid? That is not our Spanish.
Send it right here.
Right. So this is, I was talking to Veronica, I was like, how could we get this book out of and translate it correctly? Because now all the nuances, all the Dominicanism, everything has been lost in that book. And I literally, when I went to see it on Amazon, I cried. And my plan was, you know, as usual, every time one of these books come out, we do a book giveaway. But then I was like, I don't want to give away this book. Because they fucked it up. You know, and I've been meaning to have that conversation with Elizabeth, but it's like, Liz, how much say do you have? You know, how much say does an author have on who gets to translate your book? And publishers, why are you sending, you know, I don't know if it goes off to auction and anyone could just buy the rights to the book and translate it, and if that's the case, then we want in. Because we're just that tired of having our books translated by people who don't, you know, I mean, I'm sure in Spain it's correct. You know, the Spaniards are reading it and they're super happy with the book, right? But we, especially as Dominican, and that book resonated so much with me because I was able to relate to that 15-year-old protagonist. But now when I read it, I'm just like this. I don't know. I'm like the first page. There was a word that I had to look up in the dictionary. I was like, I don't know what the hell that means. And it's like, how do I share that with young Dominicanas who I always gift the book to?
We have time for one last question.
Yeah, sure.
Did you bring your own mic? Come on, Chris.
So I just had a really simple question, but I think it's a really important one. I'm a long-time organizer and campaigner, and I think all really great movements have allies. And we have a pretty large literary community in this city. It's probably the largest in the world, with many groups that many of you know. That encompass, you know, other writing workshops and groups and bookstores and you know, just a whole wide range of things. I'm just curious, how can folks outside of the Latinx community assist this movement? Like, is there anything specific we can do to do so? Just FYI, I also work at Pen America. I'm here representing myself, but I know at Pen America we care a lot about this particular issue, and I'm just curious from that perspective as well.
It's already happening. We had a lot of solidarity in mounting basically our offensive on Macmillan and Flatiron. We had intelligence sources inside. They were multicultural. You know, people who were white, people who were black, who had knowledge of the industry and actual, you know, hallway access to the discussions. Were feeding us information that allowed us with confidence to say, aha. So for example, when they closed, they stopped everybody saw they canceled these tour? Well, somebody predicted that they would do that and that they would turn Jeanine Cummins into a victim and Latinos into a barbarian horde of censorship. Do you know who predicted it? Tu servidor. A lot of us did. Yeah, I predicted it on Twitter. I said, watch. And when they did that, I was like, oh shit, we've got him. And then we checked with people inside and they were like, they are scared and getting desperate. So the solidarity and the networks are already there. We need to build them. We invited Asian American Writers Workshop and people that we knew here and in the black writing spaces. Emailed everybody. So it's happening, but And then the question, we've been getting hit up, for example, by people around the country say, hey, man, why don't we build this broad coalition of the marginalized, of the unstoried, right? A coalition of the unstoried, kind of a beautiful idea. So we're down to do that on the condition that other groups understand clearly our self-determination right now has never been recognized.
Right.
We are the most unstoried, marginalized, single massive group in the United States. Anybody that doesn't acknowledge that has been asleep in the annals of U.S. literature. So we're down to struggle together and build an agenda together, but we already have a program of work for the next few months now. Anybody going to AWP? Hundreds of us are going to descend on AWP, and we're staging actions at AWP. We planned this even before Miriam's thing. We could maybe, for example, we could join together here in New York. We've put the word out to Governor Cuomo's office to initiate an investigation of discriminatory practices against Latinos in U.S. publishing, which is centered here. So it's in their purview to do that. We are staging, as we speak, these kinds of events all over the country. And so I can envision...
Anyone who wants to host a town hall should just get in touch with you.
Yeah, we're going to need a solidarity in a month from now so that...
If you want to host one at Penn.
Yeah, in a month from now, less than a month from now, we're going to need all of you to please join us so that we have a show of force. And the show of force will bring accountability to the agreement that we've made. We don't want to come from a defensive posture. We want to come forward from an offensive posture right now. I think, and by the way, as you young buck Central American writers that I planted in the room here, it's two things. Strategically, you want to write what you write first. Just get a basic thing of what the story is. Tactically, you then want to go and tell the editor, like I did to my editors, and they were very welcoming and good people that I've worked with and my age, and I said, hey, just be clear, I don't want to be tropicalized. I didn't do that to offend them. They understood exactly what I was talking about. Those two things organize them around your dream more clearly. So
I think I'll just add to that question. Thank you for that question. To create solidarity, but it's also the responsibility of the Latinx community to support those that are further marginalized in the publishing industry, right? Like within the Latinx community, within Latinx publishing, like we are lacking like Afro-Latinx like representation, and even just like varied like right, and like indigenous people are like the least published, right, writers, and so we have work to do within our own community to challenge our own biases and to correct, right, yeah, and to support, right, the voices that are further marginalized and to check our own privileges as well.
I think one of the things that I have concerns about in terms of like allies and solidarity is this poverty mindset, right? And seeing a group of folks from like the West Coast, 3 or 4 people who were brave enough to stand up against, the big 5 and say, no, basta ya, we're done with you using our stories as tropes, as your stereotypes, as your trauma porn. I would like to see more Latino orgs come more in solidarity. I have to say, honestly, I've felt a little disappointed at the lack of, like, there are people who aren't saying something, right? There are some people who are being, so this is me calling them out. I feel like, if you're not at the head of the movement, you want all the glory. I'm cool with being just in the front lines. Like, I'm here, I have your back. Like you said that, we just jumped in. It's not about who's doing it first. It's about everyone who's going to be able to get through the gate. And hopefully the people who are getting through the gate are going to take somebody's hand and bring them forward too. And so I would like to see more solidarity within our community, like in terms of the Puerto Rican community, the Mexican community, the Central American community, and all of these literary orgs that we have in New York, the Pens, the Cabecanums, all of the people that we know, come together in support of this movement, because as you said, Roberto, it's our time. This is our time. And I love what you're saying, Sonia, about centering those who are marginalized within our groups, right? And so there is a lot of work to be done. We are at the beginning stages of what will be something that like our grandchildren will talk about, but it's up to all of us to like contribute to that. So for me, it's not just hosting events in town halls, but how will we retweet the fuck out of it? Like, we know the power of social media right now. Live stream, keep sharing it and keep sharing it and keep talking about it. That's how the most successful movements, people show up. So thank you to all of you who are here. Thank you, like for real, like in the rain, because this is what solidarity looks like, and we would love to see more of that. Yeah, this is community, and I just feel so honored and humbled and grateful, that we're sharing this space, and I hope that we keep doing this for years to come. Yes, and we have cake. We have cake because we are celebrating this victory from this incredible group. This is our group. We did this. So thank you all, and thank you, Word Up. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you, everyone. Sophia, Sonia, Roberto, Angie. Thank you. Let's have cake.